Danny Cole was tired of war. He stood at the observation window of the human carrier, watching the distant stars burn in the endless black. 7 years. 7 years of fighting, bleeding, and burying friends. 7 years of watching good people die for reasons that stopped making sense a long time ago. The Empire had come out of nowhere. One day, humanity was alone in their corner of the galaxy. The next, they were fighting for survival against beings who stood 7 feet tall, had 4 eyes, and possessed technology that made human weapons look like toys. Danny had been a young officer when the war started. Now at 34 he felt ancient. His brown hair was streaked with early gray. His hands, steady when they needed to be, shook when he was alone. He had seen too much, done too much. A soft chime pulled him from his thoughts. Lieutenant Commander Cole, the ship's communication system announced, "You are ordered to report to Earth Command Headquarters immediately. A transport is waiting." Danny frowned. Earth Command. He hadn't been back to Earth in 3 years. Whatever this was, it couldn't be good. The transport ride took 6 hours. Danny spent most of it sleeping, a skill every soldier learned quickly. Sleep when you can, eat when you can. Tomorrow might kill you. Earth looked different from orbit. More gray. More that had never reached but the strain of war had left its mark. Factories ran day and night. Cities had grown darker, dimmer, focused only on survival. Danny was escorted by armed guards through the polished halls of Earth Command. That was strange. He was a decorated officer, not a prisoner. But the guards said nothing, and he knew better than to ask questions. They brought him to a room he had never seen before. It was deep underground, far from prying eyes. Inside, 3 admirals sat behind a curved table. Danny recognized Admiral Grace, the oldest and most respected voice in the fleet. Her white hair was pulled back tight, her eyes sharp as broken glass. "Lieutenant Commander Cole," she said, "please sit." Danny sat. The chair was uncomfortable. He suspected that was intentional. "You're wondering why you're here," Admiral continued. "I'll be direct. They have offered a ceasefire." Danny's heart jumped, but he kept his face still. A ceasefire after 7 years. It seemed impossible. "There's a condition," said one of the other admirals, a younger man named George Hayes. "A strange one. They want a marriage." "A marriage," Danny repeated. "A political alliance," Admiral explained. "The Emperor has 3 daughters. The youngest princess has proposed a union between herself and a human military officer. She believes it will symbolize peace between our peoples." Danny shook his head slowly. "With respect, Admiral, why are you telling me this? Surely there are diplomats, politicians, people trained for this kind of thing." Admiral's expression didn't change. "The princess requested you by name." The silence that followed was heavy. Danny felt the weight of it pressing down on his chest. "Me," he managed. "I've never met any outside of combat. Why would she want me?" "Do you remember the Battle of Nexus 4? Admiral asked. Danny remembered. Everyone remembered. It had been a disaster. Human forces were ambushed and desperate. In the chaos, Danny's squadron had encountered a civilian transport, a ship full of families fleeing the combat zone. His commanding officer had ordered him to destroy it. Enemy craft, valid target. Danny had refused. He had escorted the transport to safety instead, risking court-martial and his own life. The aboard had looked at him with their strange four-eyed stares, and he had looked back. They were not soldiers. They were parents and children, afraid and hopping to survive. "The princess learned of your actions," Admiral said. "She believes you are honorable. She believes you are different from other humans she has studied." "She studied me." "She has studied humanity for years. She is unusual among her people. She wants peace, Commander, and she wants you to help her achieve it." Danny leaned back in his chair. His mind was spinning. This was insane. He was a soldier, not a husband, not a politician. He didn't know the first thing about culture or court life. "What happens if I refuse?" he asked. Admiral Hayes answered, "The war continues. Conservative estimates suggest another decade of conflict, millions more dead on both sides, possibly the extinction of one species or the other." The words hung in the air like poison. Danny thought of his younger sister. She was 26 now, serving on a destroyer near the front lines. He had promised their parents before they died in a raid that he would protect her, but he couldn't protect anyone if the war never ended. He thought of his friends, the ones who had already died, the ones who were still fighting. "This marriage," Danny said slowly, "it wouldn't be real, it would be political, a show for both sides." "That is our understanding," Admiral confirmed. "You would live among play the role of the princess's consort and maintain the peace. Your actual relationship would be, whatever you make of it, a sham marriage, a performance. Danny had played roles before. Every soldier did. You pretended to be brave when you were terrified. You pretended to be strong when you were broken. How different could this be?" "If I do this," Danny said, "I want guarantees. I want my sister transferred to a safe post. I want to know that Earth will honor the ceasefire, no matter what happens to me." Admiral nodded slowly. "Those terms are acceptable." Danny closed his eyes. He saw the faces of everyone he had lost. He heard their voices, their laughter, their final screams. He had joined the military to protect people. He had killed more than he could count. And now he was being asked to end the killing by holding hands with an alien princess. It was absurd. It was humiliating. It was the only choice that made sense. "All right," Danny said, opening his eyes. "I'll do it. But I need you to understand something. I'm not a politician. I don't know how to bow and smile and say the right things. If this falls apart, it won't be because I didn't try. It'll be because I'm not built for this." Admiral allowed herself a small, tired smile. "Commander Cole, that honesty is exactly why the princess chose you. You leave for Prime in 48 hours. Use the time wisely." Danny stood. His legs felt weak, but he kept his back straight. He was about to marry an alien princess he had never met, live in a palace full of beings who had been his enemies for 7 years, and somehow convince an entire galaxy that humans could coexist. He was a soldier. He had faced impossible odds before. But as he walked out of that room, Danny Cole wondered if this was the mission that would finally break him. There was nothing like Danny had imagined. He had expected cold metal and harsh lights, the kind of military efficiency he had seen in their warships. Instead, Prime was beautiful in ways that made his chest ache. The transport descended through clouds that glowed soft purple in the alien sun. Below, crystalline spires rose from forests that pulsed with gentle light. Rivers of silver wound between hills covered in plants that seemed to breathe. Everything was alive, everything was moving, and everything was utterly foreign. Danny pressed his hand against the transport window, like a child seeing snow for the first time. An escort officer stood behind him, watching with obvious amusement. His name was, and he had been assigned to guide Danny through his first days on Prime. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his skin a deep blue that shimmered when the light hit it. His 4 violet eyes studied Danny with a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been pity. "Your people have never seen ours," said. His English was perfect, though his voice had a musical quality that no human throat could produce. "You have only seen our warships, our weapons. You thought us cold." "I didn't know what to think," Danny admitted. "That is honest," nodded slowly. "The princess values honesty. You would do well to remember that." The transport landed in a courtyard of white stone. Nobles waited in formal lines, their iridescent skin painted with ceremonial patterns. They towered over Danny as he stepped off the ramp, and he felt very small, very human, and very alone. He was led through corridors that seemed grown rather than built, walls curving like the inside of shells. Everywhere he looked, there was beauty he didn't understand, art that moved, music that came from nowhere, sense that triggered emotions he couldn't name. And then he saw her. Princess stood at the end of a great hall, waiting for him. She was tall, even for her silver-blue skin marked with intricate patterns that seemed to glow from within. Her 4 eyes were the color of deep violet storms, and they fixed on Danny with an intensity that made him forget how to breathe. She wore robes of flowing white that moved like water, and her long fingers were decorated with rings of living crystal. She was alien. She was terrifying. She was the most striking being Danny had ever seen. "Lieutenant Commander Danny Cole," she said. Her voice was low and controlled with that same musical quality all possessed. I have waited a long time to meet you." Danny remembered his training. He bowed, deeper than he had ever bowed to any human admiral. "Princess," he said, "I'm honored and confused, and honestly a little terrified." A flicker of something crossed her face, surprise perhaps, or amusement. "You speak your mind," she observed. "I was told you value honesty." "I do." She stepped closer, and Danny held his ground even though every instinct told him to step back. "You are smaller than I expected. Humans always look larger in battle." "We're good at looking larger than we are," Danny said. "It's how we survive." Another flicker in those violet eyes. Yes, that was definitely amusement. "Come," said. "The ceremony will begin soon. We have much to discuss but little time." The wedding preparations took 3 days. Danny was bathed, dressed, painted with symbols he didn't understand, and taught phrases in a language his throat could barely pronounce. Servants attended him constantly, and he never had a moment alone. He learned that the ceremony was deeply sacred to the marriage among their people was rare and permanent. It bound souls, not just lives. The vows he would speak were ancient, unchanged for 10,000 years. Danny tried not to think about what he was promising. On the day of the ceremony, he was led to a temple grown from a single massive crystal. Thousands had gathered to witness the union, their faces unreadable. Danny spotted expressions that might have been hope, others that were clearly hatred. A human in their sacred space taking one of their princesses. Not everyone approved. Stood at the altar, and when Danny approached, she took his hands in hers. Her fingers were cool and smooth, and her grip was surprisingly gentle. The emperor himself performed the ceremony. He was ancient, his blue skin faded to gray, his 4 eyes clouded with age. But his voice was still strong as he spoke the words that would bind his daughter to an alien soldier. Danny repeated vows he barely understood. He drank from a ceremonial cup that tasted of honey and lightning. He felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't explain. When the emperor declared them bonded, the temple erupted in a sound that was part music, part thunder, part sorrow. Danny stood frozen, his hands still in his, and wondered what he had just done. Afterward there was feasting and celebration, but Danny moved through it all in a daze. Nobles spoke to him in broken English, offering congratulations that felt like threats. He smiled, nodded, and remembered nothing. Finally, as the alien night fell over Prime, led him away from the crowd. He expected her to take him to guest quarters, a polite distance maintained between them. Instead, she led him to her chambers. "Wait," Danny said, stopping in the doorway. I mean this is a political arrangement I didn't expect." Turned to face him. Her expression was patient, as if she were explaining something simple to a child. "By tradition, bonded pairs share chambers," she said. "We are bonded now. The court will be watching to see if you honor our customs or insult them." "I'm not going to," Danny felt heat rising to his face. "I didn't agree to." "I am not asking you to share my bed," interrupted, and something in her voice was almost gentle. "Not unless you wish it, but you will share my space. You will learn our ways, and you will not leave my side." She stepped closer, and Danny found himself backed against the doorframe with nowhere to go. "You thought this would be simple," said softly. "A performance, a role to play. You would smile at ceremonies, wave at crowds, and keep your distance from your alien wife." "Didn't you think the same?" Danny challenged. Something shifted in her violet eyes, surprise, then slowly what might have been respect. "Perhaps I did," she admitted. "But I have watched you, Danny Cole. I have studied your actions, your choices, your heart, and I do not think you are capable of half measures. Neither am I." She stepped back, giving him space to breathe. "You may sleep on the couch tonight," she said, "but tomorrow you will begin learning what it truly means to be part of my world. This is not a sham, Commander. This is the rest of your life." Danny stood in the doorway of an alien princess's bedroom, 10,000 light years from everything he had ever known, and realized he had made a terrible mistake. Or perhaps, he thought as he watched move gracefully through the room, the most important choice of his life. Only time would tell. Weeks passed on Prime, and Danny Cole learned what it meant to be a stranger in a strange land. The court was a maze of politics, traditions, and hidden dangers. Every word had double meanings. Every gesture carried weight. A smile could be a greeting or a threat. A bow too shallow was an insult. A bow too deep was mockery. Danny made mistakes constantly. He used the wrong hand to accept a gift. He spoke out of turn during a council meeting. He accidentally implied that a noble's ancestor was a coward simply by standing in the wrong spot during a formal dinner, but was always there to guide him. She taught him the old language, patient even when he mangled the musical syllables. She explained the histories, the feuds, the alliances that stretched back thousands of years. She stood beside him when nobles sneered and defended him when courtiers whispered. She was his teacher, his protector, and slowly, without either of them planning it, she became his friend. Danny found himself looking forward to their evenings together. After the exhausting performance of court life, they would retreat to her chambers and simply talk. He told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests, about baseball and birthday cakes, and the sound of rain on a tin roof. She told him about their long lives and deep passions, about the music that flowed through everything they created. One night, as they sat by a window watching the bioluminescent forests pulse with light, asked him a question he wasn't expecting. "Do you hate us?" Danny considered the question carefully. "I used to. During the war it was easy to hate. You killed my friends. You nearly killed me. But hate takes energy, and I ran out of energy a long time ago. And now—" He looked at her, at the silver-blue skin that had once seemed so alien and now seemed simply beautiful. "Now I'm trying to understand. That's harder than hating, but I think it's more useful." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I chose you because I believed you were different. I was not wrong." There were others in the court who disagreed. Prince's elder brother made no secret of his hatred for the human intruder. He was everything Danny had feared the would-be: cold, proud, and utterly convinced of his superiority. He had opposed the peace from the beginning and viewed his sister's marriage as a betrayal of their entire species. "You have polluted our bloodline," told one day, loudly enough for the entire court to hear. "Father may have approved this farce, but when I am emperor, I will correct your mistake." Danny stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward a weapon he wasn't allowed to carry in the palace. Stopped him with a touch on his arm. "My brother speaks from fear," she said calmly. "He fears change. He fears a future he cannot control. Let him have his words, they are all he has." His 4 eyes burned with fury, but he said nothing more. He turned and walked away, his robe sweeping the polished floor. That night finally let Danny see behind her mask. "You should know the truth," she said, her voice soft in the darkness of their chambers. "I did not propose this marriage only for peace. I proposed it because I am tired, Danny, tired of being a princess, tired of being a symbol, tired of having every choice made for me by tradition and duty." She looked at him with those violet eyes, and for the first time, Danny saw the weight she carried. "I have never been allowed to want anything for myself," she continued. "I was raised to serve my people, to marry for politics, to produce heirs for the empire. But when I learned of you, when I read about what you did at Nexus 4, I felt something I had never felt before." "What?" "Hope." The word seemed to cost her something to speak. "Hope that perhaps there was someone in this universe who would see me as more than a princess, more than a tool, someone who would see me as myself." Danny reached out and took her hand. Her cool fingers wrapped around his, and she did not pull away. "I see you," he said simply. The assassination attempt came 3 days later. It was evening, and Danny was walking through the palace gardens. The flowers sang softly in the twilight, and for a moment everything was peaceful. Then the shadows moved. 3 figures emerged from the darkness, dressed in black, moving with the deadly grace of trained killers. Danny had exactly half a second to recognize them as assassins before they attacked. He didn't think, he simply moved. Danny threw himself in front of, his body colliding with hers as a blade sliced through the space where she had been standing. He felt fire explode across his side as another blade found him, cutting deep into his ribs. He fell, pulling down with him, shielding her with his body. Above him, the assassins raised their weapons for the killing blow. What happened next, Danny would only remember in fragments. Scream, not of fear but of rage. The sound of ancient words spoken in a voice that shook the ground. Light, blinding and terrible, erupting from the princess like a star being born. When Danny's vision cleared, the assassins were broken on the garden path. Stood over them, her ceremonial robes torn, her silver-blue skin glowing with power he had never known she possessed. She had destroyed them in seconds. Then she was kneeling beside him, her hands pressing against his wound, her voice breaking as she spoke. "No," she said. "No, no, no, you foolish, brave, stupid human. Why did you do that? Why did you?" "Because," Danny managed, blood bubbling on his lips, "that's what husbands do." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Tears he didn't know could cry streamed down her face. "You will not die," she whispered. "I forbid it. I will not let you go, Danny Cole. Do you understand me? I will never let you go." Danny tried to respond, but the darkness was rising, pulling him under. The last thing he felt was her cool hand on his face, and the last thing he heard was her voice, promising him something he couldn't quite understand. He had come here thinking this was a sham, a performance, a role to play. But as consciousness faded, Danny Cole realized that somewhere along the way, it had become terrifyingly real. And he didn't mind at all. Danny woke in pieces. First there was light, soft and golden, filtering through walls that seemed alive. Then there was pain, a deep ache in his side that told him he was still breathing. Finally, there was a cool hand in his, and a voice speaking words he didn't understand. He opened his eyes and saw. She sat beside his bed, her silver-blue skin pale with exhaustion, her violet eyes rimmed with shadows. She had been there for days, the medical attendants told him later. She had refused to leave, refused to eat, refused to sleep. The princess had held her human husband's hand through the fever and the darkness and the long hours when even the physicians weren't sure he would survive. "You're awake," she said, and her voice cracked with relief. "You look terrible," Danny managed. She laughed, a sound he had never heard from her before. It was raw and honest and beautiful. "You nearly died," she said. "You threw yourself in front of a blade meant for my heart. You are the most foolish creature I have ever met." "You're welcome." She squeezed his hand, and Danny squeezed back. Recovery was slow. Human bodies were strange to medicine. They healed differently, responded to treatments in ways that puzzled the physicians. But Danny was stubborn, and his body had survived worse than an assassin's blade. The court whispered, as the court always did. They said the princess had gone mad, refusing to leave a human's bedside. They said she had destroyed the assassins with power she wasn't supposed to have, power that was only meant for the royal bloodline's most desperate moments. They said she had wept for an alien. Said nothing at all, which worried Danny more than any threat. As Danny grew stronger, he was allowed to walk the palace grounds again, rarely left his side. She had changed since the attack, becoming more protective, more open. She touched him more often, small gestures that spoke louder than words, a hand on his arm, a brush of fingers against his cheek, the lean of her body against his when they sat together. Danny found himself leaning back. Then the message came. It arrived in the dead of night, transmitted through a hidden channel that Danny had almost forgotten existed. A human frequency, embedded in the communication systems that had been installed in his quarters as a courtesy from Earth Command. The face on the screen was Admiral Lisa Martin. Danny had served under her for 3 years before the war. She was tough, practical, and utterly loyal to humanity. "Commander Cole," she said, "I trust this reaches you in good health." "Admiral," Danny kept his voice neutral, "this is an unexpected pleasure. I'll be direct. There are factions within our government who believe the ceasefire was a mistake. They believe they are weakened, and that now is the time to press our advantage." Danny felt cold despite the warmth of his chambers. "Press our advantage how?" "We need intelligence, Commander, fleet movements, defensive capabilities, weaknesses in their power structure." Admiral Martin's eyes were steady and unblinking. "You have access no human has ever had. You are trusted by the princess herself. You could end this war on our terms." "You want me to spy on my wife?" "I want you to remember your duty to your species." Danny was quiet for a long moment. Through the window, he could see the bioluminescent forest glowing softly. Somewhere in the palace was sleeping, trusting that he would be there when she woke. "The ceasefire is holding," Danny said finally. "The war is over. Why would we throw that away?" "Because peace on their terms is just a pause," Admiral Martin replied. "They're rebuilding, recovering. In 10 years, 20 years, they'll be stronger than ever, and then they'll finish what they started." "You don't know that." "I know history, Commander. I know that empires don't change. I know that they looked at us and saw prey. That doesn't disappear because of a wedding." Danny closed his eyes. Part of him, the soldier's part, understood what she was saying. He had seen what they could do. He had watched them tear through human defenses like paper. He had buried too many friends to count. But he had also watched weep at his bedside. He had felt her hand in his through the fever dreams. He had seen the weight she carried, the loneliness she hid, the hope she placed in him. "No," Danny said. "Commander." "I said no." He opened his eyes and looked directly at the screen. "Trusts me. She chose me because she believed I was different. If I betray that trust, I'm not just destroying an alliance. I'm proving that everything they ever believed about humans was true." Admiral Martin's expression hardened. "You're choosing an alien over your own people." "I'm choosing honor over betrayal. If humanity's future depends on stabbing our allies in the back, then maybe humanity doesn't deserve a future." The silence stretched between them, cold and final. "This makes you a traitor, Commander," Admiral Martin said quietly. "Then I'm a traitor. Put it in my file. Send someone to arrest me. But I won't spy on my wife, and I won't give you weapons to restart a war that's already cost too much." He reached for the controls to end the transmission. "Think about what you're doing," Admiral Martin warned. "Think about your sister." Danny froze, his hand hovering over the controls. "She's still out there, Commander, still serving, still vulnerable. These factions I mentioned, they won't stop because you refused, and if they decide you're a liability." The threat hung in the air like poison. Danny ended the transmission without another word. He stood alone in the darkness of his quarters, shaking with anger and fear. They had threatened his sister, the one person he had sworn to protect above all others. But he couldn't do it. He couldn't become the monster they wanted him to be. He found in her study, reading reports by the light of glowing crystals. She looked up when he entered, and her expression shifted to concern. "What has happened?" Danny told her everything: the transmission, the request to spy, the threats, his refusal. When he finished, was very still. "You could have said nothing," she said quietly. "You could have pretended to help them, fed them false information, played both sides. Why did you tell me?" "Because," Danny said, "you trusted me with the truth about who you really are. The least I can do is give you the same." Rose from her chair and crossed the room to stand before him. She took his face in her cool hands and looked into his eyes with an intensity that made his heart stop. "I knew," she said. "What?" "We intercepted the transmission. I have known since it arrived." She smiled, and it was the saddest, most beautiful smile Danny had ever seen. "I was waiting to see what you would do, and now I know beyond any doubt that my heart was right about you from the beginning." She kissed him then, soft and brief, an alien princess and a human soldier in a room full of starlight. "Whatever comes next," whispered against his lips, "we face it together." Danny held her close and believed her. The conspiracy ran deeper than either of them had imagined. In the days that followed Danny's confession, Intelligence Network uncovered a truth that shook them both. Prince had not been working alone. He had allied with human militants, the same factions Admiral Martin had hinted at, to reignite the war. Both sides wanted the peace to fail. Both sides were willing to kill for it. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. During the Festival of Unity, a grand celebration of the new alliance between humans and would assassinate the Emperor. Danny would be framed for the murder. The alliance would shatter, and both species would return to the war that men like believed was their destiny. "We have to warn the Emperor," Danny said when laid out the evidence before him. "My father knows." His voice was heavy with sorrow. "He has known for some time that opposes the peace, but he is old, Danny, tired. He hoped that time would change my brother's heart." "Time doesn't change men like, it just makes them bolder." Nodded slowly. "That is why we must stop him ourselves." They gathered allies carefully. Ben, the human diplomat assigned to Prime, had proven himself a genuine believer in peace. He offered his help without hesitation, using his connections to identify the human conspirators. Lady, a noble who owed her life from a childhood illness, provided information about movements within the court. The Festival of Unity arrived on a night when 3 moons rose together over Prime. The palace blazed with light, and thousands gathered to celebrate the first anniversary of the marriage that had ended the war. Human diplomats stood alongside nobles. Music flowed through the crystal halls. For one night, the two species were meant to be one. Danny moved through the crowd in formal robes that still felt strange on his human frame. He searched for threats, his soldiers' instincts screaming that something was wrong. The air was too tense. The guards were out of position. Something was about to happen. Then he saw. The prince stood at the edge of the throne room, watching his father with an expression that Danny recognized all too well. It was the look of a man about to cross a line he could never uncross. Danny started pushing through the crowd, but he was too far away. Was moving toward the Emperor, his hand reaching into his robes. Danny shouted. But it was Ben who acted first. The human diplomat threw himself at, tackling the prince before he could draw his weapon. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs and robes, and the throne room exploded into chaos. Guards surged forward. Nobles screamed and scattered, and in the confusion, Rose with murder in his eyes and a blade in his hand. He killed Ben with a single stroke. Danny felt the world slow down. He saw the diplomat fall, saw the blood spreading across the white stone floor, saw turning toward the Emperor with nothing left between them. And then Danny Cole, human soldier, stepped forward. The prince turned, and his 4 eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with contempt. The human pet sneered, "You dare address me?" "I dare a lot of things." Danny planted himself between the prince and the emperor, his body the only barrier. "It ends here. No more conspiracy. No more murder. Put down the blade." Laughed. It was a cold, terrible sound. "You are a fragile little creature," he said. "I am a warrior prince of the empire. I have killed thousands of your kind. You think you can stand against me?" "I think I have too." The prince attacked. Danny had fought before in the chaos of battle, in the desperate struggle for survival. But he had never faced one alone, with no weapons, no armor, nothing but his fists and his will. Was faster, stronger. His blade moved like silver lightning, slicing the air where Danny had been moments before. Danny ducked, rolled, threw himself aside, using every trick he had learned in 7 years of war. He couldn't win this fight. He knew that, but he didn't have to win. He just had to last. The blade caught him across the arm, and Danny felt fire explode through his nerves. Blood splashed on the white stone. He kept moving. Another cut, this one across his chest. He stumbled but didn't fall. Was growing frustrated. This should have been over in seconds. But the human kept coming, kept standing, kept refusing to die. "Why won't you fall?" the prince snarled. "Because," Danny gasped through blood and pain, "that's not what humans do." He lunged forward, not with skill but with pure desperate courage. His fist connected with his face, snapping the prince's head back. Before could recover, Danny grabbed his sword arm and held on with everything he had. They struggled, locked together, the human and the alien. Danny was losing. He could feel his strength fading, his grip slipping, but he had bought enough time. His voice rang through the throne room like thunder. The prince turned, and his sister's power hit him like a wave. Light erupted, blinding and beautiful, and was thrown across the room. He slammed into a pillar and crumpled to the floor, unconscious. The throne room fell silent. Danny swayed on his feet, bleeding from a dozen wounds, barely able to stand. Ran to him, catching him before he could fall. "You impossible man," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You wonderful, impossible man." "Had to give you time," Danny managed. "Partners remember." The emperor rose from his throne and walked slowly toward them. His ancient eyes surveyed the chaos, the blood, the unconscious form of his eldest son. "The conspiracy is broken," Lady reported, emerging from the crowd. "The human militants have been captured. It is over." The emperor nodded slowly. Then he turned to Danny, and his voice was surprisingly gentle. "Human," he said, "you have shed blood for my daughter, for my throne, for peace between our peoples. I offer you something that has never been offered to an outsider. You may leave if you wish. Your obligation is fulfilled. The marriage can be annulled and you can return to your people with honor." Danny looked at. She was trying to compose herself, trying to be the princess she had been raised to be. But he could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of losing him. He remembered what she had told him that night in the garden, that she had never been allowed to want anything for herself, that she had hoped he would see her as more than a princess. He saw her, he had always seen her. "With respect, Your Majesty," Danny said, "I made vows. I didn't understand them at the time, but I understand them now." He turned to and took her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." Her composure shattered. She smiled, the first truly joyful smile he had ever seen from her, and pulled him into an embrace that didn't care about protocol or tradition or the watching eyes of 1,000 nobles. The emperor watched them for a long moment. Then slowly he began to applaud. One by one, the nobles joined him. The war was over, the conspiracy was broken, and humanity had proven something the galaxy had never expected. They didn't just fight. They loved with the same stubborn, reckless, impossible intensity. And they never, ever let go.